Good morning, scholars. My name is Mr. Johnson, and I'm going to be your instructor for this year. Before we get into our lesson for today, I want to share a little bit more with you about myself. So, one thing about me is that I was born in Washington, D.C., and I was raised in the Maryland, D.C. area. I've also lived in South America. I lived in a country called Colombia. So some of you may be familiar with that. And while I was there, I learned to speak Spanish. That's a little bit about me. Again, I'm looking forward to getting to know each of you as well. Before we get started, I want to take a moment to go through our community agreement just to make sure that we're all on the same page about what is acceptable and what is unacceptable in the classroom. Okay. So we're going by what is called PETSI. Okay. PETSI stands for P, please, E, excuse me, T, thank you, S, sorry, Y, you're welcome. We also raise our hands quietly if we want to answer any questions. Don't shout out answers. Raise your hands, show respect, and with everything, make sure we're showing kindness to one another. Let's get into our lesson for today. By the end of this lesson, you will be able to identify setting by explaining the social context on character actions. Okay, so that is our lesson objective for today. So right now, I want you to do our do now activity. And for this, we're going to use a Google form, and you can find it by going to tinyurl.com/JohnsonDN. Okay, so that's tinyurl.com/JohnsonDN. All right, so there you'll find the do now form. All right, so take about 4 minutes to go through that. Okay, so everyone, we should be wrapping up in 1 minute. Okay, so we are wrapping up our do now in 3, 2, 1. Okay, I'm looking through some of your responses. You have some really great responses for this. So thank you for everyone. Thank you, Christine. Thank you for completing your do now. Thank you, Otis. I see you've completed your do now. Thank you, Ari. You've completed your do now. Thank you, Camille. I see you've completed your do now. All right. Thank you, Lynn. I see you got your do now in. Good, good. So thank you, everybody. With that, we're going to talk about some of these themes for today. We're looking at setting and we're looking at context. These two words are very important for our lesson. What is setting? Okay, Camille, can you tell me what is setting?
A setting is the time, duration, and place in which the author chooses when they're going to write about something.
Excellent. All right, good job. Now, how about let's answer this question. How does knowing the setting help us to understand characters? Otis. All right, thank you, Otis. Thinking about it, what is context? Please tell me, what does context mean?
The context are the situation and circumstances that surround the development of the plot and the story, the characters, the events, etc.
Thank you, Ari. Yes, that's exactly right. Now, what about historical context? What does that mean?
So the historical context talks about what specifically is happening at the time in the world that is huge in terms of historical developments.
Yes, a very good answer. Good answer. Okay, and next, Ari, if you could tell me, what is social context? All right, good answer. Thank you. How is the social context similar to historical context? What do these two have in common? Okay, Camille.
Social context would be the time or the space in which the event is taking place.
So now we're going to fill in the blanks. Eyes and ears should be up here. Yes, thank you, Otis. Thank you, Ari. Yes, thank you, Camille. Okay, so we're going to fill in the blank. This court case gave African American students the right to go to the same schools as white students. Okay, so fill in the blank. The answer here is Brown versus the Board of Education. Historical context. All right, historical context describes the larger blank. In that blank, you should write social context that the characters live in based on the blank period blank that the book is set. For that, we're going to say historical context describes the larger social context that the characters live in based on the time period or setting that the book is set. Okay, so take a moment to write that down. Thank you, Otis, for writing that down. Okay, Lynn, I see you have it written down. Thank you. So now we're going to fill in this blank. Characters blank and act in certain ways based on the social and historical context. So do people, right? So for that one, we're going to say characters behave and act in certain ways based on the social and historical context. So do people. Thank you, Christine. Lynn, thank you for writing that down. All right, so now I'm going to have each of us take turns as we read this story, Growing Up with Segregation. All right, so if I can get Otis to start at this first part here, starting at Lisa Delpit, and I'll tell you when to stop. Okay, thank you, Otis. All right, Christine, if you can pick up here with As Much As I Think. All right, if you could read that for us. Erie, eyes up here. Right, thank you. Excellent job. Ari, read this part for me, starting with I did not have. If you could read that for me. Thank you, Ari. All right, Lynn, if you can pick up from in large part. All right, and then I'll go ahead and read this last part here. And it says, and I remember, my Maya, the death of your grandfather when I was 7, who died of kidney failure because the colored ward wasn't yet allowed to use the brand new dialysis machine. Your world is very different, at least on its surface. In many ways, now is a more confusing time to live. Okay, so we have now completed the story. Now I want you to take about 2 minutes to turn and talk to one another. And I want you to think about these 2 questions as you speak with one another in your small groups. What are the lessons she wants her daughter to learn from her experience? That's the first question. 2, how have her experiences as a young girl shaped her attitudes today? Okay, that's the second question. Now that you've had a chance to speak with one another, I want you to stop and jot some things down. Why do you think Lisa Delpit believes that in many ways now is a more confusing time to live? In what sense is it more confusing? Okay, so you have that on your papers. So go ahead and stop and jot this down with each other. And we'll take a couple of minutes to go through that together. All right. Thank you, Lynn. I see that you have your pen out and you are writing. Thank you. Otis, I see that you're writing. Thank you. Christine, thank you. Thank you, Ari. I see that you're writing it down too. Okay, now one more time, we're going to turn and talk to one another. And I want us to take a look at this. In her view, how does that confusion shape the way young African Americans view their identity? Do you agree with her assessment? Now turn to someone else that you weren't talking to before. Take about 1 minute to discuss this. You can go ahead and write down one of the answers on your paper, and I'll call on 2 of you to share your answers. So be ready. Okay, wrapping up turn and talk in 3, 2, 1. Okay. Camille, can you please tell me what is one thing that you talked about with your partner? Okay, all right, that's a good point. Thank you, Camille. Okay, and then Otis. Otis, can you please tell me what is one thing that you talked about with your partner? Awesome. Also an excellent point. Thank you, Otis. Okay, so we're going to wrap this up for today. And I thank you that everyone was good, everyone was paying attention, and we were able to stay on task and get through this lesson together. So as our exit ticket for today, before we leave, I want you to jot down an answer in at least 5 sentences, no less than 5 sentences. Okay, and remember, each sentence ends with a period. Exactly. Thank you. So, how has the social and historical context impacted the way that Delpit speaks to her daughter? Use at least 2 examples from the text when comparing Delpit's experiences to her daughter's. Okay, so go ahead, take a few minutes to finish that. Remember, that is 5 sentences, and that's it. As soon as you're done, you can go ahead and head out to your next class. All right. Thank you, everyone.